If you're an American patient getting a brand name prescription drug, it's pretty shocking when you look at the numbers. You're often paying over 4 times what patients in other wealthy countries pay.
It's an incredible difference, yeah. We're talking a 422% markup for brand names compared to similar nations. It really comes down to how the whole system is set up, where the U.S. basically bankrolls global pharma profits. We end up subsidizing drug sales overseas.
And that whole arrangement, that's exactly what's facing major changes right now. So today, we're going deep on these huge regulatory shifts hitting the U.S. drug market. We really want to understand how the government is trying to tackle this cost shifting, using both executive actions and big Medicare reforms.
Right. We're looking at 2 massive initiatives that are really going to bite by 2026. First, there's the most favored nation idea, MFN pricing, which tries to push list prices down. And second, you've got this new, really solid $2,100 limit on out-of-pocket costs for everyone in Medicare Part D.
Okay, let's set the stage here first, just for context. The way it works now is that American consumers, well, they generate something like 75% of the entire world's pharmaceutical profits.
That's right. And manufacturers use that massive U.S. revenue stream to then offer, pretty big discounts to health systems in other countries. Helps them get into those markets.
But the result for people here, prices that are almost 280% higher overall compared to those other developed nations. It's essentially, as some frame it, global freeloading, with the U.S. taxpayer and patient footing the bill.
And that's the model being challenged directly. The current administration is saying, enough. They're aiming to force U.S. prices down, make them align with the lowest prices paid by other comparable developed nations. And this isn't just talk anymore. We're seeing actual deals, like with Pfizer and these structural changes starting in 2026. They seem determined to act.
All right, let's dig into that most favored nation, the MFN concept first. Seems simple on the surface. Just as U.S. drug prices can't be higher than the lowest price paid by certain other developed countries.
That's the core idea, yes. It targets countries in the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. But here's a key detail from the sources, a strategic point. It only includes OECD countries where the GDP per capita is at least 60% of the U.S. GDP.
Why that specific number? 60%. Why not compare prices to somewhere like India, for example, where drugs are often way cheaper?
Well, that 60% threshold is basically the policy's defense mechanism. It's built in to stop critics from arguing, oh, you're trying to tie American prices to developing nations that just can't afford much. By sticking to relatively wealthy countries, similar to the U.S., the argument is that there's no good economic reason for the huge price gap.
Okay, makes sense. So if this actually gets rolled out everywhere, what kind of savings are we talking about? Supporters seem to think it could save Medicare a ton of money.
Oh, the projections are definitely dramatic. MFN pricing could potentially cut Medicare drug spending by somewhere between 30% and maybe even 80%, depends on which drugs are included, of course. But the goal is clear. Stop the U.S. from being the R&D piggy bank for the world.
Hold on, though. 80%. Wouldn't drug companies fight that tooth and nail in court? Why are we even talking about this like it could actually happen?
That's a really fair question. And yeah, the legal battles are a big part of this story. We'll get to that. But interestingly, we have seen some movement already. Pfizer, for example, actually agreed to give MFN prices to all state Medicaid programs.
All of them. Wow.
Yeah. And that alone is expected to save states millions. And critically, the deal also says Pfizer will apply MFN pricing to any new innovative drugs they launch. That sets a real precedent, a kind of price floor.
That definitely sends a signal. And the administration's goal, as stated, is to push this MFN pricing across the board eventually, including private insurance, commercial markets.
That's the plan, yes. By directing the Department of Health and Human Services, HHS, to make new rules. So MFN is like the big hammer trying to force down prices globally. But they've also got this other tool, more like a scalpel, designed to cut out the middleman altogether.
Right, this is that government website, TRUMPRX.gov, as it's sometimes called. The concept sounds simple enough. Avoid the markups from pharmacy benefit managers, PBMs, make things more transparent.
Exactly. Connect the patient straight to the best price available. And looking at the Pfizer deal again, the discounts they agreed to offer for people buying directly are pretty significant. Take Eucrisa. For eczema, they're offering an 80% discount if you buy it through a platform like that.
80%
Oh.
off the list price. That's huge for someone paying out of pocket.
Okay.
What about other common drugs?
Well, there's L-Jans for rheumatoid arthritis. That's offered at a 40% discount.
Yeah.
And Zavzpret for migraines, 50% off for direct purchase. It basically creates this alternative pathway, trying to compete with existing direct-to-consumer options.
Okay, that sounds really promising. But our sources flagged a potential problem here, kind of a structural issue. Even if list prices fall because of MFN or these direct deals, why wouldn't everyone with insurance see lower costs right away?
This is super important, yeah. This is the complexity everyone needs to understand. The reality is only about 10% of people actually buy their drugs directly out of pocket. For almost everyone else, whether they benefit depends entirely on their insurance plan design.
Okay, walk us through that. The difference between having a copay versus coinsurance.
Sure. So let's say a drug list for $500. If your insurance has a fixed copay, maybe $50, you pay $50, period. Doesn't matter what the list price is or what deal the manufacturer offers. If MFN somehow pushes that list price down to $200, you still pay your fixed $50 copay. Your contract is fixed.
So no savings there for most people with fixed copays.
Probably not, no. Now think about percentage-based coinsurance. Maybe your plan says you pay 20% of the negotiated price. With the $500 drug, you pay $100, right? 20%. But if MFN forces that price down to $200, your 20% coinsurance suddenly drops to just $40.
Ah, okay. So only people with that coinsurance setup really see their costs drop directly when the list price falls from something like MFN or a direct purchase discount.
Exactly. It's a critical point. So MFN or these direct platforms might be great for the uninsured or people in a high deductible phase, but for the average person with insurance, unless they have coinsurance, it might not change their out-of-pocket much at all.
That's a really key distinction. So while MFN and the TRUMPRX idea aim to shake up the whole market, there's another change coming, specifically for seniors, that seems much more direct and certain.
Yes, this is the really concrete protection kicking in for 2026. A financial shield, you could call it. We're talking about the Medicare Part D out-of-pocket cap. This is a game changer for people on expensive drugs.
A huge win, definitely. Explain the basics.
It's actually quite straightforward. Starting in 2026, no matter what Medicare Part D plan you have, the absolute maximum you will pay out of pocket for your drugs in a year is $2,100. That's it. Think about patients with cancer or MS whose drug bills could hit $20,000 or more a year previously. This cap is life-changing for them.
And it gets rid of that complicated donut hole coverage gap too, right? Which caused so much stress and confusion for seniors.
Completely gone. That complexity is just wiped away. It makes costs predictable. We can actually trace how a patient gets to that $2,100 ceiling now. Part D works in 3 phases.
Okay, phase 1.
Phase 1 is just your standard deductible. You pay the full cost of your drugs until you meet your plan's deductible. For 2026, that deductible can't be more than $615.
Then after the deductible, you're in phase 2, the initial coverage phase.
Right. In this phase, the patient pays 25% of the drug's cost. For brand name drugs, the plan itself pays 65%, and the drug manufacturer actually pays 10%. This goes on until the patient's total spending for the year reaches that $2,100 mark.
And then comes phase 3, the catastrophic part, which is where the big relief hits.
Exactly. Once you've spent $2,100 out of your own pocket, you hit the ceiling. For the rest of that calendar year, your cost sharing is zero. Nothing.
Zero.
Zero. The Part D plan, Medicare itself, and the manufacturer cover everything after that point. That's the core protection. It's why this reform is guaranteed to help, unlike MFN, which depends on, market forces and legal fights.
Now, there's also something called the Medicare Prescription Payment Plan, the MPPP. How does that fit in?
Good point. The MPPP is basically a budgeting tool. It's completely optional. It lets patients spread out that $2,100 maximum cost over the year in fixed monthly payments.
So roughly $175 a month if you sign up in January.
Something like that, yeah. It just helps smooth out the costs so you don't get hit with a huge bill early in the year if you need expensive meds right away. But, and this is crucial, it does not save you any money overall. Your total annual cost is still capped at $2,100. It's just about managing the cash flow.
Okay, so that $2,100 cap is solid. But going back to MFN, trying to force prices down in the U.S. market, the world's most profitable market, that's got to create some serious pushback.
Wow.
What are the main arguments against it from the industry?
Oh, absolutely. The number one argument you hear is that it will kill innovation. Groups like FREELOADING, the big industry lobby, and their allies argue that cutting profits in the U.S. market, which funds so much R&D, will mean fewer new drugs down the road. Their estimate is pretty stark. Just applying MFN to Medicaid could cost the industry $1 trillion over 10 years.
$1 trillion. And if those profit margins shrink, what do they say happens next, practically speaking, for patients?
Well, the argument is that companies will become more risk-averse.
Mhm.
They might shelve those long-shot research projects for really tough diseases, or maybe just slow down the process of bringing new treatments to market. Basically, they say cutting prices sharply today means fewer cures or delayed cures tomorrow.
And besides the money aspect, MFN has legal hurdles too, right? We've sort of seen this movie before.
We definitely have. A very similar MFN executive order back in 2020 got blocked by federal courts. The judges essentially said the administration didn't have the legal authority to do it, and that it clashed with a long-standing part of Medicare law called the Non-Interference Clause, which basically says the government can't negotiate drug prices directly. So yes, everyone expects major legal challenges again this time, which could delay or even stop MFN completely. Its success is far from certain.
Then there's this other potential conflict, trade policy. If the administration follows through on threats to put, say, 100% tariffs on imported drugs, how does that mesh with trying to lower prices?
Yeah, that creates a really awkward tension, doesn't it? Economists are warning that slapping huge taxes on imported drugs would almost certainly drive up prices here. Even for generics, many of which come from places like India, those prices could eventually rise by maybe 25%. So you'd have one policy trying to push prices down and another pushing them up.
Okay, and one last complication ties back to something we discussed earlier, the rebate system. Lowering list prices through MFN sounds good, but it could accidentally make insurance more expensive for people, right? Higher premiums.
This is that complex feedback loop. Insurance companies get huge rebates from drug makers, and those rebates are often based on high list prices. Insurers use that rebate money to help keep monthly premiums lower for everybody in the plan.
So if MFN successfully slashes the list prices,
Then the rebates shrink, potentially by a lot.
yeah,
That revenue stream for insurers dries up, the cost has to go somewhere, and the risk is that it gets shifted back onto patients through higher monthly premiums. It's a real potential unintended consequence.
Okay, so let's try to synthesize this. For you, the listener, trying to figure out what this all means, the government seems to be fighting high drug prices on two very different fronts.
That's a good way to put it. The first front is that Medicare Part D redesign, especially the $2,100 cap. That's like a solid financial shield. It's structural, it's locked in for 2026, and it provides real, predictable cost limits for seniors. That relief is pretty much guaranteed.
But the second front, the MFN pricing and the TRUMPRX direct-to-consumer idea, that's much more aggressive. It's trying to fundamentally change how the market works, cut out middlemen, force global prices down. But it faces huge legal fights, complex insurance issues, and those risks we just talked about, like higher premiums or maybe less innovation.
And whether you personally benefit much from that second front, the MFN part, really comes down to the nitty-gritty of your insurance. If you have private insurance with a fixed copay, honestly, you might watch all this drama unfold and not see much change in your wallet. But if you have coinsurance or you're on Medicare Part D, these changes could really impact your yearly budget.
Which brings us to our final thought to leave you with. This whole push for MFN pricing is trying to link U.S. healthcare costs directly to global markets. But what if the big drug companies react differently? What if instead of accepting lower prices here in their biggest market, they decide to just pull out of some of those, weekly profitable overseas markets altogether, specifically to protect their high U.S. prices? Could the end result just be lower profits for them, but no real change in what U.S. consumers pay? That global chess game is definitely something we need to keep watching.